This is Chapter 1, Section 6 notes. So we're going to start off with a couple of properties. So we're going to start off with when you multiply real numbers, here's some things that can happen. So the multiplication or product of two real numbers with different signs is negative. So if one's positive and one's negative, when you multiply them together, it'll always be negative. So 2 times negative 3 equals negative 6. Negative 2 times positive 3 still equals negative 6. The next one is the product of two real numbers with the same sign is always positive. So positive 2 times positive 3 gives you positive 6. Negative 2 times negative 3 still gives you a positive 6. So if the signs are the same, you get a positive number. And then the product of every non-zero real number and its inverse is 1. The inverse is its reciprocal. So if you were to flip the fraction and multiply, so a number times 1 over that same number always equals 1. So negative 4 times 1 over negative 4 equals 1. Okay. Dividing real number properties. So the first one is the quotient or the division of two real numbers with different signs is negative. So if one's positive and one's negative, you're always going to end up with a negative. So negative 20 divided by 5 gives you negative 4. The quotient of two real numbers with the same sign is always positive. So negative 20 divided by negative 5 turns out to be a positive 4. If they are both positive, it would still be a positive 4. The quotient of 0 in any non-real number is 0. So if 0 comes first, 0 divided by 8 is 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. So if 0 comes first in a division problem, it's always going to be 0. The quotient of any non-real number and 0 is undefined. So if 0 comes second in your division problem, so 4 divided by 0 is undefined. If you tried to put that into your calculator, you're going to find that it gives you an error. It does not work. So 2 divided by 0 is undefined. Anytime that 0 is the second part of the division, it'll always be undefined. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the later chapters. Dividing a fraction by the same is, dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the fraction's reciprocal. You guys in middle school called this keep, change, flip. So you keep the first fraction, you change the division to a multiplication, and you flip the second fraction. So that's what happens when you divide by a fraction. You keep, change, flip. So guided practice problems. What is each product? So now we're going to be multiplying. So this says 12 times negative 8. That should be a negative number because there's one negative and one positive. So that's going to be negative 96. 24 times 0.5 will be 12. With multiplication of fractions, you just multiply the top. So negative 3 times 1 on the top will give me negative 3. And on the bottom, I have 4 times 2, which will give me 8. So negative 3 over 8 is my final fraction here. Then I'm squaring. So that means I'm taking negative 3 times itself twice. So negative 3 to the second power is negative 3 times negative 3. Two negatives actually make this a positive. So negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Next, we're going to be simplifying square roots. Now, we looked a little bit at this a couple of sections ago. So it's asking, what is the simplified form? So this first problem, we have 8. Now, you're going to take that 8 and you're going to break it down. What goes into 8? Well, 4 and 2. What goes into 4? 2 and 2. So you have a pair of 2's and you have 1 2 left over. Anything that's a pair, you can circle. It goes outside of the radical. So 2 goes on the outside for that one pair. And the square root of 2 is left because this 2 didn't have a partner. So he has to stay inside. Okay, so this next one is going to be negative 25. So the negative's on the outside. Then you have the square root of 25. What goes into 25? Well, 5 and 5. So I have a pair of 5s. Now the negative stays on the outside, so it's still going to be negative. And because I had a pair of 5s, that means 1 5 goes outside. So negative 5 is my final answer here. My next question says positive and negative, the square root of 4 over 49. So I'm going to keep the positive and the negative, so I'm going to have two answers. So I first do the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. And then the square root of 49 is 7. So I'll have positive, negative, 2 7s. Okay. So that's how we do square roots. Pretty easy. The next one says a skydiver's elevation changes by negative 3,600 feet in 4 minutes after a parachute opens. What is the average change in the skydiver's elevation each minute? So I want to go from 4 minutes to 1 minute. The way that you do this is you take that negative 3,600 feet and you divide by 4 minutes. And so that'll give you negative 900 feet per minute. So the skydiver is falling 900 feet each minute when this parachute is opened. Okay. The next section is dividing fractions. So this is your keep, change, flip. So this first one, you start out with 1/2 divided by 3/4. So I'm going to keep the 1/2, I'm going to change this divided by symbol, and I'm going to change the fraction by flipping it around. So that's going to give me 1/2 times 4/3. Now because it's a times, I can go straight across. 1 times 4 is 4, and 2 times 3 is 6. So now I have 4/6. Then I can simplify 4/6. Well, what goes into both 4 and 6? 2. So I can divide each by 2, and that'll give me 2/3 as my final answer. The next problem starts out with 3/4 divided by negative 5/2. I'm going to keep the 3/4. I'm going to change the division sign to multiplication, and I'm going to flip the next fraction, so negative 2/5 instead of negative 5 seconds. So then I just multiply the top. 3 times negative 2 will give me negative 6, and 4 times 5 will give me 20. There's only one negative here, so you only should have one negative in your answer. And then simplifying. What goes into negative 6 and 20? Well, 2 does again. So if you simplify that, that goes down to negative 3/10. So that's your final answer, negative 3/10. And then you have this problem. It says, what is the value of x divided by y when x is negative 3/4 and y is negative 2/3? So I'm just going to plug this in, and I'm going to write it like this. So I'm going to write it out horizontally. So instead of this, this is the same thing as x divided by y. So I'm going to take the x number and plug it in for x. Negative 3/4 divided by y, which was negative 2/3. Doing my keep, change, flip, I get negative 3/4 times negative 3/2. And so that'll be negative 9. Careful now. Is it going to be negative or is it going to be positive? Negative 3 times negative 3 should give you positive 9. And then 4 times 2 will give you 8. So 9/8 will be your final answer.